Hi, this is Pittsburgh Matt, and I'm an alcoholic. Today we're going to be going over the chapter We Agnostics in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Like I have in the other videos, we're going to follow the same method as far as the underlines and highlights to the subjects matters that are covered in the big book, with the physical craving highlighted in yellow, the mental obsession in orange, helping others in green, definitions or synonyms underlined. In blue, the prayers highlighted, the promises in pink. Anything with a question mark is going to get an underline in green. The must, the had to, and the has tos are circled and have recovered in past tenses underlined in red. Now, before I address the chapter to We Agnostics, I want to go back to one of the stories in the back. And in this story, he talks about no matter how far his spiritual journey goes, he always refers back to We Agnostics because he has a different meaning, but I'll put it in his words. He says, over the next few months of my life, slowly began to change as I worked on step 1 of our recovery program. I listened to speakers and began a big book study with an older member. In Micmac folklore, there are little people called, I don't know how to pronounce this, but we'll just call them goblins. They live in the mountains, but they often sneak into our homes and play tricks on us, usually at night so we don't see them. When I noticed that chapter 4 of the big book, We Agnostics, had appeared to change, I told AA members that the goblins were fooling around with my big book. And you know what? They are still at it today. I now understand that the spiritual malady should be my main concern, and that more faith I have, the fewer problems I will have. Today I have more faith than I ever had. As my faith grows, my fears lessen. So that's just on page 499. And of course, just to point out, I have highlighted in blue, this is one of my favorite prayers. And this is where, he surrenders himself in a prayer, addressing as his creator as his buddy. Well, buddy, I guess there's just you and me. And that's one of my favorite prayers. I just wanted to point that out. But, you hear AA speakers say all the time that, it just seems the words in the big book change because if we work the program, we're going to change, and so is our perspective. And this book is to facilitate that progress that we have in changing our attitudes and our conceptions. So with that said, we're going to go to We Agnostics. So in We Agnostics, we're going to have 2 additional highlights or underlines just for this chapter. And it's in the liabilities and ways to start. So other than those 2 underlines, we're still going to follow the same highlights and underlines that we addressed in our table of contents. So here we are on the first paragraph. They're going to address taking step 1. When you honestly want to, and you find you cannot quit entirely, that's the mental obsession. Or if when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, that's the physical craving. We learned about that in step 1. And when we approach step 2, that this is part of step 1, saying, hey, we're alcoholic. And now we gotta do something about that. Otherwise, it's just the inevitable doom. And so as we go on, here we have some had tos and a must. It says, but after a while, we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of life, or else. And it's also underlined in orange. This is a way to start. Just coming to the fact that my life is unmanageable. And then our experience shows you need not be disconcerted. It's unsettled or confused. So now we're going to go to the next page. Many of us would have recovered long ago, but we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how much we tried. So other methods just didn't work. We got to find something else. And then here's a question here. But where and how do we find this power? Well, here's the answer. That's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. That means we have written a book we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. And it means, of course, we're going to talk about God. Now, I can attest that, kind of a disclaimer before we get deeper in this chapter. Nothing in this chapter will conflict with any type of moral dilemma you may have when it comes to spirituality, or as far as God goes, or your belief in God at all, or what it is you believe in. It's not going to conflict. The only thing it's going to tell you is, the liabilities of misconceptions that we have leading into it, and ways to start to open your mind up. And an open mind it's a sign of strength. I used to believe it was a sign of weakness, us against them. All those conflicts, they were kind of just old ideas and prejudices that other people had put into my head. And not that they put it in my head, that's how I received them, And that's what this chapter is going to be about. It's about like a reset of a belief system, and whether it has to be simpler or more complex. I mean, everybody's different. So we're gonna go on, and we're coming up on some liabilities. We had neatly evaded or entirely ignored the subject about God. So and then we had doubt and prejudice. Been violently anti-religious. The word God brought up a particular idea of him with which someone had tried to impress them during childhood. We imagined we had abandoned the God idea entirely. All these are liabilities to, how are we gonna believe in our Creator today? And these things just get in our way. They're not essential. They're just liabilities. So now I'm going to go to this next page. So we thought that faith and a dependence upon a power great beyond ourselves was somewhat weak, even cowardly. Self-reliance didn't work for us, and that's okay, because something greater, even the Creator that created us, is at work. We looked upon this world with wearing individuals and wearing theological systems, an inexplicable calamity with deep skepticism. So wearing is mentioned twice, and it means in conflict with each other. We looked askance at many individuals who claim to be godly. Askance is suspicious or disapproval. And if there's anything in here that you grossly disagree with, that's fine. You can just move on. You just discard it. And that's what this chapter is actually telling you, is, this is going to be a personal belief to you. It's not up to anybody else. It's between you and your Creator. Just like in that prayer that we addressed in the beginning of the chapter and back in the stories, well, buddy, I guess it's just you and me, and at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. So now we're coming up on a question. How could a supreme being have anything to do with it all? And who could comprehend a supreme being anyhow? And then yet in other moments, here's a way to start. We found ourselves thinking, when enchanted by the starlight, who then made all this? There was a feeling of awe and wonder. And now a liability, our own fears, kick in us, but that was fleeting and soon lost. We just lose hope. And when we can't just figure it out, and it's because it's higher than a human or an earthly matter. Here, another way to start. We lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves. And we're coming up on a promise. We commence to get results, even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power, which is God. So that goes back to, a mustard seed of faith. That's not covered in this book, but it is in other words, and then covered in this book. Much shorter leaf, here's a liability. We did not need to consider another conceptions of God. Someone else's conception, it's their business. We're faced with an alcoholic problem. It's between us and our Creator. No one else is going to get us out of this. And another thing too, it's a spiritual malady. And even when you've worked the steps and things are going good, it's time to grow. You're always growing. Your purpose here it isn't done until it's done, if you know what I mean. And we got a promise. We began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction. And a way to start, provided we took other simple steps, which is the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And a promise, we found that God does not make too hard terms to those who seek Him. And then here's a way to start. To us, the realm of the Spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive, or forbidding those who earnestly seek. You don't got to get it perfect. The prize is the journey. And that's what they're pointing to here. And then a promise, it is open, we believe, to all men. There's no, if you're on this earth, then there's a reason for it. And we're going to go to the next page here, and then we're going to go to the next video after we address this. So here we go. We have a liability. Let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. Don't be distracted by other people's concepts or, if anything conflicts and you can't get your head around it, just keep seeking for yourself. God works through others, and I believe that. But, you got to shut off the stuff that doesn't apply to you, or maybe you're not there yet to understand what somebody else is saying, and that's okay, because this is your journey, nobody else's. And that's what I believe they're saying here. And here's a promise. At the start, this was all we needed to commence spiritual growth. We found ourselves accepting many things which then seemed entirely out of reach. Those are promises. And now we're on to ways to begin with a had to. If we wish to grow, we had to begin somewhere. We used our own conception, however limited it was. In certain documents, that they just refer to the Creator as I am. And there's no, it can be as simple as that. It could be as simple as the all. It could be as simple as, everything around it. It's just your own conception, however limited it may be, is a way to start. So now we approach step 2. Do I now believe, or am Or am I even willing to believe that there is a power greater than myself? If this is your first time taking step 2, this is the question for you. There's a question farther on in a chapter for someone that's going through step 2 again, which I do on an ongoing basis. It's part of the journey. You know, taking that road, you know, that looks similar but a little bit different, you know, a day at a time. You know, taking step 2 on an ongoing basis is a spiritual growth. And here's a way to start. As soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, the promise is we emphatically assure him that he is on his way. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderful, effective spiritual structure can be built. And then another way to start is, here's a statement. I wish I had what that man has. I'm sure it would work if I could only believe as he does. So here, you know, they're talking about an example. You see somebody and they got that glow. They got that glow about them, and they have something. You know, it's you know, this sense of just a sense of being. You know, it's really contagious, and you know, you want to be like that, and that's what they're talking about. And then here's the doubt. Here's the liability. As soon as you start to doubt, but I cannot accept as surely true the many articles of faith which are so plain to him. You know, this stuff it's not easy. You know, you got to dig deep. You got to seek. You got to be open-minded. You know, this is just doubt, but everybody that goes down this path has those doubts, and you can't be discouraged. You know. And then, so here we go. Here's a way to start whenever those doubts creep in. So it was comforting to learn that we could commence at a simpler level. You know, it doesn't matter. You just start. Just get the ball rolling. You know. Later on, I'll point to another line in the stories where you have to act yourself into better thinking. You know, and that's, for some of us, that's how it's got to be. But this is the first part of We Agnostics, and I'm going to lead into page 48 in the next video. Thank you for your time.